Okay, I think we can begin. There are already some people who have joined, and let us probably wait for one more minute and then see other people join or not. Uh, okay, so we will begin the main part of this course today, which is stochastic geometry, and it will take a couple of lectures to introduce you to some introductory notions of stochastic geometry. So the first part of the theoretical, let's say, introduction is called stochastic geometry primer 1, right? And inside this stochastic geometry primer 1, we will be covering two, let's say, subtopics, which is that of point process essentials as well as Poisson point processes. A couple of pointers before we begin is that throughout this talk, throughout this introductory theoretical part, I will be denoting, or I will be using these notations. Right? The random variables will be denoted by capital letters. Their realizations or other deterministic quantities would be denoted by small letters. Random vectors or capital letters, generally or conventionally, it is used to be denoted by bold-faced capital letters, but it's difficult in the whiteboard. So I will be putting this vector sign. So random vectors are basically denoted by capital letters with vectorized sign. Their realizations or other quantities are small letters with this vector sign. Right. I'll be also using some set theoretic representations of unions and intersections and so on, where the sets are represented using capital letters, which are not, let's say, random variables. I understand that there would be a bit of confusion regarding random variables and sets, but as and when they occur, I will be making them a bit more specific. Okay. So before we begin, it goes without saying that please feel free to interrupt me at any point. The best way to do it is just simply to unmute yourself and ask the question. You can also alternatively ask using the chat box, but I'd prefer if you just simply ask it with the microphone, right? Um, Okay, so let's begin. In the previous class, I had discussed a very brief motivational reason why we at all need stochastic geometry. So, can anyone try to recall what it was and why do we need stochastic geometry? Anyone? No? Okay, so I hope I'm audible, right? So, am I audible to you? Can you just confirm in the chat box if I'm audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. So in the previous class, I had discussed that for modeling large-scale networks, which consists of many base stations and possibly multiple tiers of base stations, many users, and complex propagation environments, including blockages and so on. For modeling these kind of networks, classically, a couple of things have been done. One is to use some kind of abstraction, which means all your signal powers, all your interference powers, specifically the interference powers, were combined together and modeled using some random variable, possibly some Gaussian distributed or something else. It gave certain analytical aspects to this characterization, but it lacked a bit of accuracy. On the other hand, the other approach was to do large scale system level simulations, but they were very computationally expensive, and they did not have the beauty of the analytical expressions which actually give certain, let's say, design insights to it. So that was the main motivation for employment of this stochastic geometry in wireless networks, and we will see how it is done. Okay. So in the first class itself, which is today, we will be seeing some examples which makes our life easier to model such networks. Okay, so we'll begin with point process essentials. So I'll move through the class, and though the people who have done my DCS course know that these live classes are will be will be conducted very, very slowly, with a lot of examples, such that even if we cover a less part of the syllabus, it's important to cover it a bit more thoroughly. Okay, so we will start with point process essentials, right? And the most significant aspect of stochastic geometry is called a point process. Right. So a point process, which will come up again and again. To put simply, a point process, sometimes denoted by phi, is a random collection of points residing in a measure space. So for those who do not know what a measure space is, it's not a problem. You can think about it in terms of a Euclidean space. So for example, if you consider a two-dimensional plane, it is a R square Euclidean space. If you consider the three-dimensional volume, it's a R cube Euclidean space, right? So to put simply, point process is simply a random collection of points given by a set xi. So let's call it xi vector, where I belongs to the set of natural numbers, right? And it is simply a random collection of points residing in a measure space, right? And again, to repeat, if you do not know what measure space is, we will not be too much bothered about it. For cellular networks, we will consider it to be the Euclidean space. So RD. So the d-dimensional Euclidean space. Okay. Now let us focus on what this represents. Okay. So imagine if we are considering a two-dimensional Euclidean space, which is your Cartesian plane. Imagine you have a bag of balls, right? And you take, the bag of balls contains certain number of balls which is unknown to you beforehand. Okay. So imagine you are picking up a certain number of balls simultaneously from this bag, right? And you are throwing them around you while you are standing at the origin, right? So you have a basket of, let's say, such points or balls in our example, right? And we are considering the Cartesian plane. What you are doing is picking some of them up. For the moment, we don't care about how many of them you have picked up, and you are throwing them around. So the balls, they will have some bounce, they will move around, but they will come to a point where they are stationary. So suppose we denote by this x's their final position of rest, right? So each of these points, which is denoted by an x coordinate and a y coordinate, right, is one of such points. So these are x1, x2, x3, x4, and x5, right? For almost all of our cases, we will not be bothered with the order of these points, which means it doesn't matter which was the first ball, which was the second ball. In other words, it doesn't matter which is x1 and which is x2. It's simply a collection of such points visualized together, right? So now, in this case, you had actually picked up 5 balls and they had ended up at these 5 places, right? So this is a random process in the sense that if you had actually picked up a certain number of other balls, or even if you had picked up the same number of balls, imagine you have picked up 5 balls again, you'd continue this experiment, you pick up 5 balls again, and you throw them again in this Cartesian plane. It might necessarily be true that they end up at the same 5 points, right? They may end up at other points as well, right? So this dual randomness, for example, the number of balls which you are taking out of this bag is actually a random quantity. You don't know whether it's 1 or 2. By the way, 0 is also a possible outcome. So 0 to possibly infinite, right? The number of balls you're taking out of this bag, which is a random quantity, you are throwing them in this Cartesian plane and they are ending up at certain points, which are actually random, two-dimensional random variables. This together constitutes a stochastic process, which we will be calling point process, particularly for these end points or the points at which these balls come to rest. Okay, so I hope this, let's say, this feel of what a point process is clear to you. Okay, you should be, I mean, I'll again go very slowly, but please interrupt at any point which you think anything is not clear. Okay, so we will be denoting these points. So this is simply a set of such points where I belongs to the set of natural numbers, which mean we are denoting these points as x1, x2, x3, right? And this set of such points will be denoted by phi, which is actually the point process. Okay. Now, naturally, phi in this case is a subset of Rd, or in this particular example, it is a subset of R2, right? So this is one way of visualizing a point process. Remember a couple of things. Number of points which are coming out of this bag can be random. It can be fixed as well, but for the generalized example, they are random. They are countable. I hope everybody knows what countable and uncountable is. Does anyone? Okay, I mean, I'll for the sake of repetition, countable sets are sets which have a one-to-one correspondence with the set of natural numbers. Okay, for example, the set of integers is a countable set. They have infinite elements, but it is a countable set. The set of real numbers is an uncountable set because it doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence with the set of natural numbers. Okay, so you bring out a countable number of balls out of this bag. It can be countably finite, it can be countably infinite, and you throw them around this Cartesian plane. Okay, another way to visualize this or to interpret this is the random set formalism, which is this one. But another way to interpret this point process is called the random counting measure. So a random counting measure in this one, or in this type of visualization, the idea is to simply count the number of points falling in any particular set A, which is a subset of Rd. So what are we doing? We are simply counting the number of points. So I will be using this notation again and again. So this represents the number of points, right, falling in any set A, which is a subset of Rd. So let's try to be a bit consistent and let's only focus on the Cartesian plane. Okay, so mathematically, it is denoted as psi of A, which is simply the number of points falling in a set A, is the summation of the indicator functions that xi belongs to A or not, right? Where xi is a part of the point process. So I guess everybody knows what an indicator function is. Is there anyone who doesn't know it? I can repeat it for them. Anyone? Okay. So simply put, indicator function of some value, let's say y is equal to 1 when y is true, 0 otherwise, right? So what does this do? This just sees whether xi is belonging to that set or not. If it belongs to that set, it counts it as 1, and we sum all such points, or sum 1 for all such points which belong to this set A. Okay. Now, what can we say about this quantity psi of A? Right. Is it a deterministic quantity? Is it a random variable? Is it a realization of random variable? Can anyone express what it is?
Sir, is it a realization of a random variable?
So depending on psi of A is actually a random variable, which means that if you have fixed A, right? Suppose you have fixed this set A, right? Let me call this set A as this guy. So this is A. Of course, it is a subset of R2. Now in your experiment, you are taking out some balls, right? And you are throwing them inside this Cartesian plane. In this realization, psi A equal to 1, right? Because only one ball falls inside A. But if you repeat this experiment, it can have a different value as well, right? It can be possible that there are no balls inside of this set A. It can be possible that there are multiple balls inside of this set A. So accordingly, psi of A, even for a given A, even if you fix an A, psi of A is a random variable. It depends on what phi is. So psi of A is a random variable. The realization for this, for a psi of A in this example, or in this realization of phi, is 1, right? So psi of A is a random variable which takes in many values. In this realization, its value is 1, right? So psi of A is a random variable whose distribution depends on phi, right? So if we can, this an important point is that if psi of A is exhaustively considered for all possible sets, so if psi of A is considered for all possible sets A, right, it can completely describe phi. Which means what? So A has many possible values, right? So A in this case is a circle of a certain radius with a certain center, but A can in reality be any subset of this two-dimensional space, right? If you consider all such possible A's exhaustively, which is of course an infinite number of them, right? And if you can define the random variable psi of A for all such possible A, of course it defines what phi actually is. Okay, so it seems a bit complicated to see this definition, but I mean, it's important to note that if such random variables are characterized for all possible values of A, you define what the entire point process is. Okay, so let me take a straight away take a concrete example to calculate this phi or psi of A. And describe what possibilities occur. Okay, so suppose my point process phi, so let us consider a point process phi, right? It has two realizations, phi 1 and phi 2, right? I'll give a pictorial description of what phi 1 and phi 2 is. Okay, so phi 1 consists of 2 points, one located at 1 comma 0 and the other located at 0 comma 1. So this is the realization called phi1. There is another realization called phi2. It consists of 3 points, one at 0, 0, another at 1, 1, and another one at 2, 2. Okay. Now try to see what this means. It means that out of all the possibilities of how many balls you could have picked up out of that bag of balls, and out of all the possibilities where those balls eventually would have come to rest, we are considering a very, very, very small subset of these possibilities and defining a point process, right, which consists of only two realizations, which means when you pick up the number of balls from this bag of balls, you can either pick up two balls, right, or you can pick up three balls. In addition, whenever you pick up two balls, deterministically they are resting or they are ending up at 1, 0 and 0, 1, right? And deterministically, when you pick up three balls, whether you pick up three balls or two balls, that's a random thing, right? That's a discrete random variable, which means which realization you are considering becomes a random quantity. In fact, let me be a bit more precise. Let's say that phi1 occurs with a 1/4 of probability and phi2 occurs with 3/4 of probability. Now, what does this mean? This means each time you go to pick up this number of balls from this bag of balls, 1/4 of the times you are picking up two balls, 3/4 of the time you are picking up three balls, right? However, given that you have picked up two balls, conditional on this fact, they are always ending up at these two locations, 0, 1 and 1, 0. And conditional on the fact that you are picking up three balls, they are ending up at these three locations, 0, 0, 1, 1 and 2, 2. Okay. So imagine, try to imagine that how much smaller part of this entire subset of point processes this is. This is only a very, very, very small part of it. Now let us consider some A, right? So for the purpose of our evaluation, right, let us see what psi A is. In our definition, psi A, so how many, okay, psi A, as I explained, is a random variable. How many values can it take? First of all, is it a discrete random variable or is it a continuous random variable for a fixed A? Suppose I have fixed one A. Anyone? Please feel free to unmute and speak. I mean, this course will only work if you are interactive, otherwise it will be a mess. In case you don't speak, I'll try to pick up random people. Okay. Whatever you think is the answer. It doesn't matter. Please let me know. So my question is for this point process, which is given by these two realizations, phi1 and phi2, each occurring with a certain probability. Phi1 occurs with 1/4 of the probability, phi2 occurs with 3/4 of the probability, right? For a given set A, we have not defined it what it is, but we can fix it. Whether psi A is a random variable, whether it is a discrete random variable or a continuous random variable, and what values it can take. Anyone? Let's
So
see.
I think it will be a discrete random variable.
Sorry, yes.
So I think it will be a discrete random variable.
Okay, it's a discrete random variable. So let's write it down. And what are the values it can take?
So in case of phi1, it can take 1, 2, or 0.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it depends on what A is, right? So it
Yes,
can take, in case of phi1, it can take the value psi1 of A, right? Which is simply to say indicator function of the first point, which is 1 or 0, 1, 0, whether it belongs to A or not, and indicator function of 0, 1, whether it belongs to A or not. As you correctly pointed out, in case of phi 1, it can take values 0 when both these points does not belong to A. It can take value 1 when either of these points belong to A, and it can have value 2 where if both of these points belong to A. It depends on what A is, right? Similarly, for psi 2 of A, it is an indicator function of whether 0, 0 belongs to A or not, right? Whether 1, 1 belongs to A or not, and the indicator function of whether 2, 2 belongs to A or not. Okay. So if I try to fix a certain A, so let's consider A to be a ball of center 1, 1 and of radius, let's say 1.1. Okay. So this is a notation again I am introducing and I will use it throughout the course. This represents, so B of x, r represents a ball. In 2 dimensions it's a circle, in 3 dimensions it's a sphere, but a generic term for it is a ball with a radius r and center x. Okay, so what does this mean? I am considering a set A which has a center 1, 1, which means the center is somewhere here, and it has a radius 1.1, right? Which means what? We are looking at something like this. Yeah, this is the set A. If I try to draw it here, it will be something like this. Yeah, this is the set A. Now tell me, if I am considering this random variable psi of A for this A, what are the, how do you describe a discrete random variable? You will say that this discrete random variable takes in values this with a probability that, right? So what are the two or three or whatever different values this psi of A can take? How do you describe this psi of A in this case? Anyone? So how many values can psi of A take, given that this is A?
Sir, within this example, there are 2 points, but we can take infinitely many, no, in the general case.
Yeah, I mean, we are still focusing on this example. Okay.
Okay. With
Yeah.
regard to this,
In this example, what are the two different values? I mean, of course, we have established that psi of A is a random variable. So what are the values that this random variable can take?
So for phi 1, it should take 2, and for second one, it should take only 1 value.
Right. So it is have no. They're not two values, but the value is 2. Right. I think that's what you mean.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So psi of A is a random variable which takes value 2 and it takes value 1 with probabilities. Can you tell me?
The probability for phi 1 and phi 2.
Right, exactly. So psi of A takes in value 2 with the probability 1/4, and psi of A takes value 1 with a probability 3/4. Yeah, I hope this example is clear for everyone. Is there anyone who has not understood how do we get to this random counting measure? So psi A is to say that we are counting the random variable which denotes the number of points falling inside of A. If there is any question, please let me know right now. Okay, if it is clear, let's go to another point, which is called a marked point process. Okay, so a marked point process is simply a point process where a random variable known as a mark. So this is a point process, right? So let me write it here, and from the next class onwards, I will use this shorthand. So PP means point process. So mark point process is a point process where a random variable which is called a mark, yes, we will call that mark QI, right, is associated to each xi belonging to the point process. Okay, now this mark can be an independent random variable with some distribution of its own, of course, or it can be a function of the point process itself as seen from that point of the point process, right? So I'll give you an example again to explain what a mark is. Okay, so suppose again we are considering a two-dimensional plane. Okay, now let me give you a practical example. So suppose you want to map a forest, right? And in that forest, you want to build a point process that denotes the location of the trees in that forest, right? And associated with each tree, we will have a mark which denotes the width of that tree, or to be more precise, the girth of that tree, right? Which means the with each point we have a value or a feature associated to it which denotes the radius of the tree. Yeah, so how would that point process look like? So if we look at a smaller snapshot of that two-dimensional point process, we would have points similar as before. They are random locations residing in this two-dimensional space, right? They might not necessarily be governed by any deterministic value or deterministic, let's say, relative geometry between each other. They are just random collection of such points, but associated to each point, now you have a random quantity, which is, let's say, the radius. So a bigger tree is associated with a larger radius, a smaller tree is associated with a smaller radius. And in some cases, if you look from over or if you look at the plan of this forest, which means a top view, you can have overlapping trees as well because the leaves run into each other. So you can have things like this, right? So if we denote these x's by xi's, I'm writing a vector because it consists of two features, right? The abscissa and the ordinate, right? However, what we are saying that with each xi, there is a quantity qi associated to it, which denotes a feature of that xi. Okay. In this example, it's a independently, we can consider it to be an independent quantity than xi, which means that for each xi, let's go to x1. And if its radius is, let's say, 2 meters, we can go to some other, let's say, x2, and its radius is 0.5 meters. So these quantities 2, 0.5, which denote this radius of these trees, they can be an independent quantity than xi's themselves. Okay. In this example, they are independent. However, they can also be a dependent quantity. For example, let us assume that you are considering a cellular network. Okay, what happens in a cellular network? You model the locations, you are trying to model the locations of these base stations as a point process, which means again you have a random collection of points, which denotes where the base stations are located. Okay. Now you say that for a point of interest, let's call that the origin. Why is it a point of interest? At the moment it doesn't matter, but you can think about it as at the origin your let's say very important customer is located, or very important event is going on, like a sports event or a political rally, or a music festival or something, right? So what you would want is, you would want to cache or store in these base stations some useful information regarding that important point. So this is our important point in this case. In case it is a sports event going on, you want to cache let's say previous match highlights, or let's say sports the profile of the players and these kind of pages which the users at this point might ask. You want to store this information around these base stations. Each base station has a limited capacity to do it. Okay. Whenever a user fetches such a data from this important point, it might want to, or ideally it might want to fetch that data from the nearest possible point, or nearest possible base station, because that gives the best connection. Okay. So ideally you would want to cache some of this data here, right? You would also want, since everybody has a limited storage and there is admission control, which means not all the users can access the same base station simultaneously, you would also want to cache some of that data here. You would also want to cache some of that data here, and all of these points, so on and so forth. However, for points which are very far from that important point, you would want to cache a very small fraction of such data, right? Why? Because not only they are it's very unlikely that somebody is accessing it from this point, right? It will go to that point probably when all the other nearby points are busy or something. Additionally, this guy has to address or cater to some other users located near it as well, right? So from the perspective of this point or this circle, right, you are caching a different amount of, or different quantity of data depending on where the base station is located from that point. In that case, let's say the size of the stored data, which is the cache memory employed for this particular event, be the mark. Okay, so X denotes the location of the base stations. The quantity of the data stored in each of these base stations is the mark, and in this case your marks, which are Qi, here the Qi was independent of each other, which means it didn't matter where you are, you had the same probability of having a certain mark. In this case it's a bit different. It depends on where Xi actually is, it governs what Qi would be, which means Qi is larger when Xi is closer to the origin, and so on. Okay, I hope this example is also clear. There are many things you can model using marks. For example, you can model the location of the base stations as the point process, and you can assign an independent random transmit power to each point. So for example, if you have if we forget about this example and if we come back to a generic cellular network where these x's denote the location of the base stations, but now you want to measure how much power each base station is transmitting. You can model it, or one way to model it is to say that each of these base station transmit with a power pi, which is probably exponentially distributed with a parameter 1, which means it can happen that this guy is transmitting very powerfully, this guy is transmitting very with a lower power, but nevertheless each of these base stations, the transmit power of each of these base stations is an independent and identically distributed random variable. Okay, I hope this this part is also clear. Okay, what a mark point process is. Is there any doubt regarding this part? Yes, no? Okay, in case there is no doubt, we will now move on to some important statistical measures of these point processes. Okay, the first one being an expectation measure. So what is an expectation measure? So expectation measure of a point process is a function which maps a set A to the mean number of points in it. Okay, so it is defined, I mean, you can already try to see that it is defined as the mean of the random variable which we had already described, which means an expectation measure denoted by mu of A is simply the expected value of the random variable psi of A. So what is a measure? It takes in certain aspects as an input. In this case, it takes sets as input. So this is a set which acts as an input to this expectation measure, and it gives out, or it results in a value which gives us the mean number of points in A. Okay. So for this example, which we had already described, right? So this was, let's say, example 1. So can you try to find out as an example 3? Can you guys tell me what is the expectation measure of psi A from example 1? Anyone? I mean, let's look at this one. It's a simple thing.
Just need to
1.25.
Yeah, so what you have to do is basically you have 2 occurring with a probability of 1/4, right? And you have 1 occurring with a probability of 3/4, right? So this is basically psi 1 into 1/4 and psi 2 of A into 1/4, right? So it's simply half plus 3/4. Okay, whatever this is. So what this is 5/4, right? So that's what you meant, 1.25. Yeah. What does this mean? It means that if you consider, or if you fix that set A, on an average 1.25 points fall inside of that set A. It does not mean that always 1.25 number of points falls in that set A. It means across all the realizations possible. In this simple example, there are only 2 of them, right? Across all these realization, or across these 2 realizations possible, on an average 1.25 number of points falls inside of this set A. Okay. Before going into the applications of such calculations, let me just quickly describe couple of other statistical measures. The next one would be called the probability generating functional. Right? A probability generating functional in shorthand from now on will be called PGFL. Right? So to describe it, let a function which is mapped from Rd, or in our case R2, let's again be consistent, to the set of positive real numbers, or let's say R minus, okay, R plus denotes including 0 to infinity. Okay. So this be a function. Then the probability generating functional of a point process with respect to this function. This function can be anything. Okay, it can be, I mean, it can take in values x, y and generate x square plus y square. It can take in values x, y and generate x by y or something like this. Of course, remember that always it will result in some value which is either 0 or larger than 0. Okay, so suppose, and it, because this probability generating functional is defined only for such functions. Okay, so probability generating functional of a point process with respect to this function is defined as the mean of the product of the function's values at each point of the point process, at each xi belonging to phi. What does this mean? So let's denote the probability generating functional with E, or let's again let us denote it by g of phi. So probability generating functional takes as an input a function and gives you a value which is the expected value, because it is the mean of the product of the function values. So what do? You go to each of this point of this point process, evaluate the function at that point, right? Multiply all of them, right? So you do it for all the points present in that point process, and you are taking an expectation of this quantity. Okay. So it might be a bit difficult to visualize it at this point, but let's see from the perspective of this example 1.
So excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So can you repeat it? I lost my connection for a bit.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that suppose you have been given a function. Okay. So this function, this f, what does it take in values as input? It takes in values as points of R2, right? It's a mapping from R2 to some R plus, right? So as a result, we can put these points of this point process as an input to this function, right? Suppose this function is defined as, for example, let's take an example that it is simply the distance of that point from the origin, right? So a function evaluated at point xi, let's call that 1, 1. What it will be? It will be simply square root of 2. Okay. What does this mean? That you define a function which evaluates at each point a value given by this mapping f. Okay. In this example, it is simply the distance of that point from the origin. Okay. Now what we are interested in? We are interested in to go to each point of a point process, evaluate this function, and take an expected value of it. Why it is an expected value? Because this product is a random variable. Remember that this product is a random variable because it depends on that realization of the point process what this product is. If you calculate the product for realization 1, it might not be true for the realization phi 2, right? So let's take a quick example 4 to describe this. I hope this part is clear, what this function f does and what g is trying to calculate. But to make it a bit more clear, I'll come back to you. Let me just give this example 4, and I think it will be a bit more clear. Okay. In fact, to make it a bit more easier, let's take that same example which I was describing. Okay. So let fx vector be simply the distance of that vector from that origin. Okay. For all x belonging to R2, right? So in that example 1, what would be the values of this product? So let's see for the first realization. In the first realization, what we are doing, we are going to each point, measuring its distance from that origin. So for this guy it is 1, for this guy it is also 1. We are taking the product of these things. It's clear, I hope. So in that, one of the possibilities of this product is actually 1, which is 1 multiplied by 1. In the second realization, what would be the product? In this case, this guy's value of that function is square root of 4 plus 4, right, which is square root of 8, or 2 square root 2. This guy has square root 2. This guy has a value of 0, right? So as a result, the product for this realization is actually 0. So in this case, for example 1, the product of f of x vector when x goes through all the points of this point process, depending on whether it's phi1 or phi2, it takes on values 1 and 0. This occurs with the probability 1 by 4. This occurs with the probability 3 by 4. As a result, the expected value of this product, which is given by the probability generating functional, is simply 1 times 1 by 4 plus 0 times 3 by 4, which is 0.
Sir, can you explain again how did you get this 0?
Yeah. So let us, for the purpose of this discussion, redraw the two realizations here. Okay. One realization is this one, right? The other realization is this one. Okay. Now there are two things happening here. One is the evaluation of this function at these points, right? So what is this function? Function is simply the distance of the point from the origin, right? So if I, in that first realization, let's say x1 and x2 are the 2 points, right? Sorry. Yeah. So x2 is 1 point, x1 is another point, x1 is simply 1 comma 0, x2 is 0 comma 1. So what would be the value of f of x1? Can you tell me? I think it was Sauradip, right, who asked this question. So Sauradip, can you tell me what would be the value of this function evaluated at x1? Remember, the function is simply mod of
Yeah,
x,
at x1 it would be 1, at x2 it would be 1, so
right?
entire thing is 1 into 1, 1.
So the product is 1, right?
Yeah.
We are taking the product of this function values which are point-wise calculated at each point. In this case, there are 3 points, x1, x2 and x3. Now can you see why it is 0? So at x3 it is 2 root 2, it's the distance of it from the center. At x2 the value of the function is simply root 2, distance of it from the center. At x1 the value is 0 because the distance from its center to that x1 is 0. Product of 0 root 2 and 2 root 2 is 0.
Sir, but as
Yeah.
per the region, x1 and x3 falls out of the region, no? Or is that not considered?
No, here there is no a.
Okay, here there is no way.
Yeah. So if it was a, if we had denoted x vector belong to a, where a is some defined subset of R, right? Then it would have been a different case. Here we are saying that, yeah. So here we are saying that the probability generating functional of a point process with respect to a function phi f is defined as the mean of the product of the function values at each xi belong to phi, right? So I hope this part is clear, right? So there are two values which we got, 1 and 0, and the mean of it is simply 0.25. Is this clear or there is some issue still? So if there is not, one more, let's say, corollary from here is that the probability generating functional can be used to compute the Laplace transform of a random variable. Let's call that random variable f if it can be written in the form f to be some function or some summation of these functions at each point, right? Okay, how this is possible? Can you recall what the expression for Laplace transform is? So Laplace transform is simply a Laplace transform of this function, or in let's say in mathematically rigorous terms, it is called the Laplace functional because it takes function as the input. So similar to what a function which takes in values and produces other values, a functional takes in function as input and produces values. Okay, but let's not go into the details of it. A Laplace function or Laplace functional or a Laplace transform of this random variable is simply the expected value of e to the power minus s and that random variable, right? Now what this corollary means, what this corollary means is that if we can express f as sum of some other function g, which means that this becomes the expected value of e to the power. So this is simply a denotation of e to the power minus sum of this s and gxi, where xi belongs to this point process. This can then be written as exponential of a sum becomes the product of exponentials where xi belongs to the point process. What it means is that instead what we were doing previously, we were going to each point and calculating the value of this function and taking a product, right? Now suppose that if we are not interested in the product, but we are interested in this sum of this quantity, which is a summation of some function at these points, right? So here we were interested in product of distances, we can be interested in the sum of distances. So if the sum of distances can be expressed as some random variable f, we can calculate the Laplace transform of that random variable f, provided we can express it as this summation. Why we can do it? Because we can use this property that the exponential of a sum becomes the product of exponentials, and now this inside exponential function can be considered to be our function f, and simply it becomes the expression for the probability generating functional. Okay, again at this point it might be a bit difficult to appreciate why this is important, but when we come to the application of these things, it will become more and more clear. Okay, this probability generating functional is particularly important in many wireless applications, where the Laplace transform of for example the interference is usually an intermediate step in the characterization of the SINR, and I'll come to it while modeling cellular networks, right? Let me give a demonstration of why this might be important. Okay, so let's consider another example. Right, so suppose there are base stations which are randomly deployed in an infinite two-dimensional space. So base stations are belonging to R square. The location of these base stations are modeled using a point process phi, let's say phi bs, which is simply the locations x vector, right? I belongs to natural number, of course. They denote the locations. Now suppose you are interested at the interference that you are receiving at a point. Okay, what does interference mean? It means simply the sum of the transmit power or the received powers at a location from all other base stations, right? The sum of interference at any point y is actually a random variable which can be written as the sum of the signals from each base station attenuated according to some power law. Again, since our class consists of undergrads as well as PhD students and masters, Can someone, for the purpose of this discussion, clarify what a power law is? And if you are transmitting, let us recall that if you are transmitting from a point and you are receiving or you are observing that signal at a point which is at a distance of r and there is no fading involved, what would be the received signal or received power at this rx? Anyone? So let's start with undergrads first, because I know that they have done fields and waves. So is there anyone? So I see Badri there. Badri, can you tell me how would, suppose you are transmitting with a power of P, right? What would be the power received at this point Rx?
I mean, I don't recall the exact expression, but it will attenuate by r square.
Right? And why do you think that is?
Because I mean, because of that term. Okay, I need to brush up.
Do you remember that there was something called the freeze equation, FRII?
Yeah, freeze transmission equation. Yes.
Yeah. So what was it?
That was I mean power transmitted into gain of the, and I mean if we consider the antennas to be the transmitters,
Mm.
then gain product of the gains into the power transmitted into wavelength divided by 4 pi r square and into some polarization mismatch also.
Right. So let's say that these gains are fixed quantities and the power is a fixed quantity, and we combine each of them in this term P. So P is, I mean, I understand the formula that you're trying to say. It's some P, GT, GR, things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's call all of them as P because they are more or less the fixed quantities. What we are only interested in is its variation with R, right? So you are saying that if we are receiving a power R at this point, so R is basically inversely proportional to R square, something like this.
Yes.
And why is it so?
Because first of all, there were some about, I mean, how this particular formula was derived. I mean, if I remember correctly, it was corresponding to a kind of like I mean antenna cross section. What kind of I mean, what kind of the how much of the transmitted wave is falling on like effective area of
Right.
and is facing the signal that it is trying to receive.
Yes, the concept is the same. To put it in more, let's say, concrete terms, if you think about a radiating element at this center, right, it is radiating certain amount of energy, right, and accordingly some power, which means some that radiated amount of energy per some unit of time, right. That energy is getting dissipated at all directions, which means at all three-dimensional directions. So if you consider a sphere around it, right, at a distance of r1, let's say, the energy which is passing through this sphere of radius r1 is equal to the energy which is passing through this other sphere of radius r2, because there is no energy which is stationary, right? If it is continuously radiating, whatever is passing from this is also passing from the other one, right? Now with r, the surface area of the spheres increases as r square. So if we are considering the amount of energy per unit area per unit time, right? It should obviously, if the energy is constant and the area is increasing by r square, the energy which is crossing per unit area is decreasing by r square. Is this convincing enough?
Yeah, because I mean, if we treat the wavefront as sphere, then surface area will
Yeah.
be 4 pi r
Yes, that's correct. Yes. So yeah, that's an important point. If we have a spherical wavefront, yeah. So since it's a I mean omnidirectionally radiating element, we have such a kind of formulation. And in case it is a free space, which means there is no other let's say attenuation business going on, your received power is inversely proportional to the distance to the transmitter square of it. Okay, so if we have a power law which says that the received power, so you are interested at a location y, so we are interested at a location y in the plane, again, it's always interesting to keep a figure in mind. So suppose these are the locations of the base stations, right, which is given as x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on, x5 and x6. What we are interested in is this point, which is y. And at this y, what I am interested in is the sum of all the powers that I am receiving from all these base stations. Okay. So from the perspective of this kind of modeling, the interference, which is the sum of all such powers, are a function of where these base stations are located, because the location itself plays the important role of how it varies or how the received power varies. So for all points which are belonging to this point process of phi bs, what we will be getting is this transmit power divided by the distance between the base station and y squared. Okay. So in this case, sometimes this term is called the path loss exponent, and we will come to examples where, of course, this is not 2, it can be some other value. It will generically be denoted by alpha, and we will see why this path loss exponent comes into the picture. For the people who have done wireless communications, it should be a straightforward thing to know, but of course, we will, for the sake of this course, we will repeat it while we go along. So suppose you are located at this position y, right, and around you these base stations are located, and you know where this x1, x2, x3, x4, x5 is and x6 is. Whatever you receive, the sum of all these powers is a deterministic quantity, right? However, since it will not always be true that wherever you are located, the relative configurations of these base stations around you will be a deterministic quantity. The sum of all the powers that you receive from, in this example, the nearest 6 base stations will also be a random quantity, right? Since we will mostly be dealing with we will come to the definition of it, but translational and rotational invariant point processes, which means it doesn't matter which direction you look at or wherever you go, we will assume the point process to be somewhat uniform around you, and we will come to this description a bit later. But what I want to say is that this y could have been any other point, something like this. So maybe y1 and y2 and things like this. So around, from the perspective of y2, its point process of these relative distances of the base stations is different than what y1 is observing, right? What I mean by observing is, suppose that for the purpose of calculation of y1, let us shift the origin. So let's forget about y2 at this point. Let us shift the origin to y1, and you see what we are interested in is a function. The function is only dependent on the distance from the distance of the points from this origin, right? So now from the perspective of y1, this same set of base stations have certain combined received power. On the other hand, from the perspective of some other point, let's say y2, which means the origin from the perspective of y2 is located at y2, the same set of 6 base stations have a different spatial configuration, right? So if we take any such generic point, we can consider that the configuration of the spatial configuration of the base stations around that point forms a point process, and accordingly the sum of the powers which you receive from all these base stations is a random variable. So this I is a random variable. Is this construction clear? Why will I be a random variable? I hope it's clear, right? For the moment, nothing complicated has arrived. So what you would be interested in, or what an operator sometimes is interested in, is that what is the expected value of I? Which means if you are located at some random point in your network, what is the average interference you are expected to observe? Okay. What it means is that we would be calculating the expected value of sum of these terms. Okay. Now this itself becomes a bit more, I'd like you to appreciate why this is a very difficult thing to calculate or difficult thing to evaluate. Because remember, in our construction of this point process, how we began our today's class with, the you can, what you are supposed to do here, you are supposed to take an expectation of a certain number of functions evaluated at some point, so fx1 plus fx2 and things like this, right? Not only individually these functions are random, because x1 itself, or where the first point lies from your perspective itself, is a random quantity, but the number of such terms is also a random quantity. In the example which we discussed or which we developed, is that the number of balls you are taking out of that bag is also a random quantity, right? In this example, of course, we were fixing 6 base stations, but of course the number of base stations is a random quantity. So not only the number of base stations is a random quantity, but also where they are located is a random quantity. So this dual random nature makes the evaluation of this term, which is of larger interest to a network operator. I mean, in terms of your performance, it's the average interference that you are expected to observe. It becomes a very, very challenging task. So we will see in the subsequent classes how tools of stochastic geometry would help us to evaluate these kind of quantities. Okay, I hope this part is also clear. Okay, before we end today's class, I will try to introduce a very special type of point process, which is called a Poisson point process. By the way, was it clear, this previous discussion? I think it was okay for everyone. If there is still some doubt, please feel free to let me know again now. Okay, if everything is clear, we move on to the last topic for today, which is that of a Poisson point process. Right. So a Poisson point process is a special type of a point process with expectation measure mu. So a Poisson, again, this I will be denoting by P, 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 right? So a Poisson point process is, of course, a point process with an expectation measure mu of A, or let's say mu. I mean, you understand that sets go in as inputs to this thing, right? So a Poisson point process is a point process with an expectation measure mu if two conditions hold true. What? The first condition is psi of A. Remember, this is the random counting measure, which means what is the number of points falling inside of A, is Poisson distributed with mean mu of A for all A belonging to that RD. Okay, again, let's keep it simple. Let's call it R square. Okay, what does this mean? Can anybody recall what a Poisson distribution is? Yes, no?
Lambda e to the power 1. Lambda.
Yeah. So what does this mean? It means simply that the probability that the psi of A is equal to n is given by the Poisson distribution, which is e to the power lambda pi r, or lambda or let's say mu of A. Mu of A to the power n by n factorial. So this is not something which I am coming up with right away. Okay, this is simply the Poisson distribution. So Poisson distribution, what does Poisson distribution say? It says that the probability that a random variable to take value n, so Poisson distribution is valid for discrete random variables which are taking values 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. The probability that this random variable takes in a value n, which is this 0, 1, 2, 3, is given by e to the power minus some parameter, that parameter to the power n divided by n factorial. We will come to what this mu of a is for certain class of point processes, but this construction should be clear at this point, right? It simply means, or it simply governs the probabilistic nature of the number of points, or this random counting measure, which is the number of points falling inside a set A. Another condition, or the second condition, that should be satisfied for a point process to be characterized as a Poisson point process is that for m disjoint sets A1 until AM, the random variables psi of A1, psi of A2 until, let's say, psi of AM are independent. What does this mean? These two together mean that if you consider a point process, which is simply a collection, I'm repeating it, it's simply a collection of such points residing in this two-dimensional Euclidean space. It simply means if you consider any random set A, so let's directly draw a random set A like this. So the number of points falling inside of this set A, which is this number of this red x's, they are Poisson distributed, which means, of course, sometimes depending on the realization of this red x's, sometimes inside this A there will be no points, sometimes there will be a 1 point, sometimes there will be multiple points, but probabilistically it is governed by a Poisson random variable, which means the probability that there are n number of points inside this set A is given by the Poisson distribution of the number n. The second point is, if you consider disjoint sets A1, A2 and A3, so A1, A2, let's call it A3 and A4 and so on, right? If you consider disjoint sets A1, A2, A3, A4 as shown in this figure, the number of points falling inside of this set A1, A2, A3, A4 are independent of each other, which means here this number 1, here this number 2, here this number 1 again, here this number 0, these numbers are independent of each other. So the people who have done queuing theory as a course, for them it should be very intuitive, because queuing is simply, or arrivals are simply one-dimensional Poisson point process. So in Poisson arrivals, what you had studied is the number of arrivals within a certain time window is Poisson distributed, and if you consider disjoint windows of time, the number of arrivals in these disjoint windows are independent of each other. Okay, is this part clear? Before completing, I'll just I'll add one more point, because in our course we will be most interested in something called a homogeneous Poisson point process. So homogeneous Poisson point process is a Poisson point process in which with a uniform intensity. Okay, what does it mean? That the expectation measure of this set A is simply some constant times the Lebesgue measure of A. Okay, if you are not sure about what Lebesgue measure is, it's simply the size of A. For those who are familiar with measure theory, it's the Lebesgue measure of A, or informally it is the size of A. By the way, this time around there is a mathematics course floated called measure theory. In case you are interested in the set theoretic notions, that's a course for you. But for the purposes of our course, we would not go into details of this. Lebesgue measure of A simply means the size of A. For example, if you consider a set A which has a radius r and it is given by a circle of this radius r, the Lebesgue measure of A is simply pi r square. In 3 dimensions, if you consider a sphere A with a radius r, the Lebesgue measure of A is simply 4 by 3 pi r cube. Yes? Any questions? Because if later on this becomes confusing, it will be a bit difficult to come back. Okay. So what does this homogeneous Poisson point process mean? It means that the average number of points, remember that mu of A is simply the expected value of psi of A. So the mean number of points falling in this set A is simply a constant multiple of the size of set A, which is again intuitively satisfying, because larger the size of A, larger is the probability that there are more points falling into it, and larger would be the expected number of points falling into it. Okay. So the time for today's class is over, but I will take 5 more minutes to go through this point. The homogeneous Poisson process means that it doesn't matter where you are taking your set A to be. It just matters how big your set A is, which means that if you have a point process given like this, and if you consider a set A which is of radius r at this point, the average number, again, the number of points falling inside of this set, remember, is a Poisson random variable. But for the moment, we are interested in the average number of points lying inside this set A. Okay, the average number of points lying inside this set A is the same as the average number of points lying at any other set B located at any other location of this two-dimensional space. These are the same as long as their sizes are the same. Right? So mu A equal to mu B as long as LA equal to LB, which means both their sizes are pi r square, and accordingly the average number of points falling inside of this set A is lambda pi r square. Is this part clear? If this is clear, I will finish today's class with a final example, which is probably example 6. Now, before moving on to the example, let us recall what for a Poisson point process, what would be the value of this probability of number of points. So probability of psi of A to be n, remember, if A is given as this ball of radius r, let's say centered around 0, right? Then phi of A is simply e to the power minus lambda pi r square, pi lambda pi r square to the power n by n factorial. So this is simply coming from this first definition of a Poisson point process, which means the number of points falling inside of a set A is simply e to the power minus the mean number of points there, mean number of points to the power n by n factorial. It's simply the Poisson distribution. Now we saw how this mean number of points is simply a lambda times the size of A. So that's how we got to this lambda times pi r square. I hope this part is clear, right? Now what we are interested in is a special case. So suppose you are a mobile phone located at the origin of this Cartesian plane. For this mobile phone, we are interested in the location of these base stations, which is given by a Poisson point process, right? So these are this x's for a Poisson point process bs, right? And we are interested in a distance r. Let's say r can be 10 meters or 20 meters or whatever. What we are interested in is the probability. So it might be of practical interest to you as well. So if you are located at your home right now, what is the probability that within 20 meters of you there are no other base stations? Okay, so this is the quantity that we want to explore or evaluate, which means what is the probability that psi of A, again remember A for this example is simply ball of radius r centered around 0, is equal to 0, which means there are no points of this point process falling inside of your circle of interest. Remember that it will not always be true that there are no points, but we want to understand the probability of this being true. For example, in this realization there is one point which is inside, but for some other realizations there will be no points. Some other realization there will be 2 and more points. We are only interested in the probability that those realizations occur that there are no points. What it will be? It will simply be e to the power minus lambda pi r square, lambda pi r square to the power 0, which is 1, divided by 0 factorial, which is 1. Okay, so the probability around you, right, that there are no base stations within a distance of 10 meters is simply e to the power lambda pi into 10 square. Now lambda is simply the number of base stations falling inside a circle of radius 1, right? So what is lambda? If we are interested in this b of 0 comma 1, or not 0 comma 1, but b of 0 comma r, where let's say the size of it is equal to 1, then mu of this b 0 comma r is simply lambda times L of this b 0 comma r, which is nothing but 1, and it is lambda. So lambda is informally the number of points per square unit of distance. Let's not be too formal and say lambda is the number of points per square meter in your area, in your Cartesian plane, which means how many base stations are located per unit square meter, or it can be per square kilometer, any distance measure you take, it would be lambda. Okay, so now if I tell you this information that in New Delhi, right, approximately there are 10 base stations per square kilometer, that means I have given you lambda. Yes, you will be able to tell me that the probability that within 10 meters of you that there are no base stations, given this information that in New Delhi there are approximately 10 base stations per square kilometer, would be exp to the power minus 10 per square kilometer multiplied by the area in kilometer, right, in kilometer square. So which will be 1, let's say 1. So it's simply e to the power minus 10 pi. This is the probability that within 1 kilometer of you there are no base stations, given that there are 10 base stations per square kilometer in New Delhi, right? As an homework, try to plot this in x-axis, try to have r, in y-axis try to have e to the power minus pi lambda r square, and plot it for various values of lambda 1, lambda 2, and so on. For an operator's perspective, what he would be interested in, suppose he wants to redimension the network, which means that given this 4G network which is around us, he wants to deploy a 5G network, and he according to his services, if he is given this information that a 5G service you will be able to sustain such that there is a very high chance that a user should have a base station within, let's say, 20 meters of it. So at a distance of 20 meters, the probability that there are no base stations is given by this, and he has to decrease it to a certain probability. That would be the guarantee of its service. Then what should be the lambda he should be choosing, or which means how many new base stations he has to deploy, thereby increasing lambda such that within 20 meters he gets to this target value. So these are the problems which we will be starting with in the next class. I hope this class was clear. Please, again, I'll be staying here for 5-10 more minutes. The class is over. You might feel free to leave. but I'm here for 5-10 more minutes for any of you to clarify the doubts of today's class. Just before you go, I have uploaded a textbook. It's not a textbook that we will be following throughout the course, since if you already open the textbook, you will find out that it is a stochastic geometry book written from a mathematician's perspective, which is very different from what we will be doing. And unfortunately for you, a bit fortunately for me, there are not enough video resources present in the internet. In fact, in India itself, there are a very few offerings of stochastic geometry, 5 or 6 institutes. That's it. So there is no NPTEL course as well. Okay. So the best thing that you can do is attend all the lectures. The second best thing that you can do is, even if you don't attend, try to see all the videos that are posted in classroom. Okay. And we will be going very slowly because this is, suddenly the level of the maths will become a bit more. I'm telling you this information because I know that your ad drop is just around the corner. So I'll be staying for 5 minutes more. Please feel free to ask any doubts from today's class. Otherwise, please feel free to leave.
Sir, will you be sharing this as a PDF?
Yeah, I will be sharing the PDF as well as the MP4.
Okay.
Although contrary to DCS, I think there are not any students from DCS except Badri probably. So contrary to, but this is for the record just. Contrary to DCS, if I see that the attendance is becoming very, very low, I will be stopping to post the videos. It doesn't make sense. Okay. Any other doubts, clarifications? If not, maybe we can stop today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.